The cursus honorum, or course of honor, was not a path that was set in stone, but rather a guide to the magistracies necessary to attain high public advancement. Marcus Livius Drusus, it seems, went through these offices in a somewhat non-traditional order. We know, for instance, that Drusus served in some administrative capacity in Anatolia, rather than serving first as tribune of the plebs. It's likely he was attached to the staff of Lucius Cornelius Sulla who, as propraetor of Cilicia, was tasked with settling affairs in Anatolia. While there, Drusus attracted a significant amount of attention by conspicuously refusing to wear his official rank insignia as a way to respect the authority of his superior. Most Romans, when given a badge of authority, wore it proudly, sometimes even haughtily. Marcus Livius Drusus's form of respect garnered him a lot of praise over the rarity of such humble behavior. Though Sulla did not return from the east until approximately 92 BC, we know Drusus returned before him and served a term as aedile. Using the vast wealth his father had acquired, Drusus lavishly entertained the public, which gained him even more popularity and praise. The more lavish the entertainment, the more likely the aedile's name would still be on the public's lips come election time. By the time Sulla returned to Rome, Drusus, though he had already held his lower magistracies, unexpectedly announced his candidacy for tribune of the plebs for the upcoming 91 BC year. The historians are not clear as to why he made this surprising choice, but Marcus Livius Drusus's 91 BC tribunate was so controversial that it is still debated to this day. Though we don't know why he chose to run for tribune of the plebs, we do understand the political landscape surrounding this unexpected decision. Understanding Rome's most pressing political matters, and knowing some of the various pieces of legislation he attempted to pass offers some insight for unraveling the controversial tribunate of Marcus Livius Drusus. In 95 BC, while Lucius Cornelius Sulla was still in the east, the consuls, Lucius Licinius Crassus and Quintus Mucius Scaevola passed a new, but extremely polarizing law. In response to the greatly inflated number of Roman citizens on the voting polls, which did not match the census records, the Lex Licinia Mucia was passed. This law forced all Italian Roman residents to re-register with the censors, in order to prove their citizenship. Those who refused to re-register would be investigated. If found to have illegally entered their names as Roman citizens, in order to vote and take advantage of Rome's grain dole, the illegal aliens would be subject to punitive judgment. Soon, the optimates, and those who sympathized with this new law, were labeled as prejudiced against all Italians. Xenophobia ran rampant. The subject of illegal immigration suddenly tainted every debate in Rome. Any attempt to sort out the imbalanced number of alleged Roman citizens was met with accusations of racism. Paranoia grew. One side argued that the Lex Licinia Mucia was only an investigation into illegal immigration, and those who could prove their legal citizenship were not at risk. The other side promoted the fear that this new law was simply a way to mark and tag the Italians for future persecution. Another significant event, which may have prompted Drusus's unexpected decision to announce his candidacy as tribune of the plebs for the 91 BC year, took place around this same time as well. Drusus's uncle, the ex-consul, Publius Rutilius Rufus, had recently returned from his service as military legate in Anatolia. During this legateship, Rutilius Rufus had prevented major abuses to the people of Smyrna from the equestrian Publicani, or public contractors. The Publicani were the Equite businessmen who bid on government jobs, such as construction projects, road building, and tax collection. They accompanied governors to their provinces, then bled those provinces dry by overcharging for taxes and appropriating, from the locals, anything deemed valuable. The Equites, who had become very powerful under the consecutive consulships of Gaius Marius, had grown accustomed to getting what they wanted, and were outraged that Publius Rutilius Rufus had dared to interfere. Once back in Rome, the Publicani brought Rutilius Rufus to trial. They charged Drusus's uncle with corruption and provincial abuse of the citizens of Smyrna, modern-day Izmir, Turkey. The court, which was made up of jurors drawn solely from the Publicani's Equite class, was a kangaroo court that represented the interests of the Publicani. They successfully indicted Rufus for embezzlement, and had him exiled from Rome. In order to prove the obvious nepotism within the Equite courts, Rutilius Rufus chose, as his place of exile, the very city he was accused of abusing. Because Publius Rutilius Rufus had been the first Roman to stand up to the Publicani on their behalf, the citizens of Smyrna, from whom he was accused of extortion, welcomed Rufus with all honors. The fate of Publius Rutilius Rufus likely played a part in Drusus's sudden decision to run for tribune of the plebs, as one of Drusus's first legislative moves was an attempt to reform the kangaroo court which had found him guilty. The problem with this particular court had begun in the late 120s BC, during the reforms of Gaius Gracchus. At that time, Gracchus had tried to build a support base from among the Equites, in order to offset the opposition he knew he would get from the patricians. This was several years after the patricians had manipulated the murder of his brother, Tiberius, and Gaius Gracchus needed an alternative power base from which he could safely challenge their supremacy. It's unlikely Gaius Gracchus foresaw the future abuse of this court. The court was now a tool used by the Equites to force senators into corruption through a type of protection racket. Senators were required to cater to the Publicani's demands in the provinces so that they would not find themselves dragged through the Plebeian Court on charges of corruption and mismanagement. Marcus Livius Drusus's response was to create balance within this court by passing a bill requiring the juries be mixed with Equites and patricians. Drusus hoped that a mixed group would break the deadlock, resulting in more just outcomes. Unfortunately, Drusus would not succeed in making this law stick. Around this same time, Drusus tried to pass another piece of legislation which seemed to go hand in hand with his attempted reform of the Plebeian Court. He proposed a law which made Equites liable to prosecution for bribery. This meant that, not only patricians, but Equites could now be taken to court for offering or receiving bribes. Unfortunately, like his attempt at court reform, this anti-corruption legislation would be dismantled, and remain untested. Marcus Livius Drusus is often viewed as one of the major demagogues of the late Roman Republic, yet his initial reforms were moderate and reasonable. Drusus seemed to understand that things could not go on as they had between the increasingly deadlocked and polarized factions. Change was inevitable, but would Rome's factions allow it?